Oops. Syncing sound. 3, 2. Alright. I wanted to do a kind of addition to the post I just made. There are a few videos. I need a little editing. For some reason the mic and the computer and the cam all caused a distortion, and so the sound's all off, and it's weird, but it should be alright. This is, well, no, it records clear, I remember, and then it plays back with a glitch. They're separate recordings now, so I should be able to clear up the sound at least. The previous post I just did, the soul stealing, I really don't even remember the full name. The name isn't really as descript as it kind of seems that it is, because it would kind of be too much to even name it, if you will. Temporal bubbles within bubbles, the soul stealing grid. So the idea, there's a couple ideas. I didn't really finalize it too much, but the idea is basically that if you look at all the information that's been disclosed from all over the field, if you will, by now, consciousness transfer, soul basically transfer or containment, biological cloning, temporal dilation from electrogravitic devices, and then the electrogravitic nature of time and consciousness, Earth, the electric universe, blah blah blah. Sorry, blah blah, but all that stuff. The idea in the post is that to make it kind of more succinct, basically you can the people who died in the past, the moment of death, their consciousness can be in their domain frozen. It's like the Inception movie or whatever, and every other movie like that, where time now, you can't be stopped completely. That doesn't really exist. There's no such thing as no motion. And so or if there is no motion, then there's no motion anywhere, and it's all, kind of, the whole universe is like that. As soon as you have motion anywhere in the universe, this is relativity, everything is in motion by, kind of by relativity, I guess. I'm very tired again. Other videos you'll hear me saying that. It seems to be in an acceleration cycle, a lot of changes happening all at once, and it's usually stressful for people. That's kind of what happens. It's all part of the process, which is kind of creepy to say, but maybe it'll make more sense in a little bit. And so then time is drawn to a near standstill, and they can be relayed through a quantum system. I explain it more, with more words, more details in the post, but through a quantum relay, because the mind or the soul, and then these computer systems that are made to work on the same level, and the quantum and the mind, quantum nature of time and the property of the soul and the mind, they're all entangled. When you induce one or change in one, you're inducing change in the other, and so on. It can be used kind of like a sliding scale to pull that consciousness into anywhere that quantum system can access. And so the entire civilization is blanketed through this scalar supercomputer system measuring consciousness and also connected on the quantum layer, and therefore it's basically like a big time machine. So then you have the person at the moment of death, they go into that system, and they're in now they're in the quantum layer. They can be brought through biological cloning into any period where that technology of cloning exists. So as soon as it was invented here, it's as if as soon as that happened, from there on, for everyone involved, time pretty much was convoluted. It's not that it doesn't mean anything, it no longer had to follow those strict rules. And of course it was used in the maybe some malignant ways, if you will. And so but as well, what else, what is a non-malignant way, if you will, as far as as soon as this is used, it's going to disrupt the timeline for everybody involved, unless everyone's in it or no one's in it. And then unless it was used to the most minute degree where they didn't change anything in history and didn't alter anyone else's existence. But at that point, they'd have to be really observant and careful, and the people that were doing it weren't doing it to be observant and careful, they were doing it to take over. And so, but the idea is then, after that second one, now that person's basically dying in the first layer, like Inception, the first dream. As they're falling over dead, they're living out life in some other timeline or time period. And in that one, when that happens, the same process can occur. And there's bubbles within bubbles of basically a chain. I'm not going to remember the words. A series, I think. Chain of like an electrical circuit where they're basically being powered from that first bubble. But it is... From that one on, it's a relay, and it's kind of like an overlay system or an artificial system. The idea I left out of the post is that, and I'm forgetting like the second or third part of it now, but the first part at least is that now in that quantum supercomputer system, when the consciousness is transferred through that filtration system, and this has to do with the soul and consciousness and true like self-awareness and the artificial system generating a replicated form of our self-awareness, which is consciousness through the modified biological system, the brain. And to get that perspective, please read the post if you wish. I'm being weird. Don't wish, just either do it or don't do it. We're not wishing upon a star here. And so the idea is in between the moments of transfer, you're going to have some type of virtual domain, a waiting room, a lobby for like a multiplayer system where that consciousness is going to be housed, an artificial soul system. That system is the cloning centers. And the cloning centers are a semi-physical environment, meaning it is a physical environment overlaid with that. If you were to be there physically, you probably wouldn't see anything going on, or you see the machines, okay? You'd have to be in the system to see the things that are taking place, but it's also mixed because within that system you have the clones being produced. And so it's as well, there's the cloning version of that, which is you wouldn't have to be plugged in to see that, it would just be right in front of your face. But the idea is when the person is first transferred, it's a Teslian coil shield system surrounding the entire base. Within it, it's got certain materials that block it from going outside of it, and also makes it very difficult to enter it. And but again, we're in one big electrical system, so it's all connected. So it's not impossible. And in the same sense, it's dangerous. It's not possible for that stuff that's going on there to get out, and that's part of what happened. But as well, it is virtual. When it get out, it's in the system, so it's like Freddy Krueger. It's in the dreams. But the idea is that when the souls are first uploaded, they are essentially watching from above, and it's a big toroidal orb-like view because it's just within that system, and they're floating around looking at all the horror and pleasure and games and crazy stuff going on. That's part of the basis for getting people in that system. The video a couple days ago that I need to put out, I'll probably just upload the audio maybe. It talks about how it's basically children are brought into the system through kind of time reversal, age regression, and they're found as adults, either from the past looking into the future, from the future them using these systems to go back and entangle everything and create these false overlays in the people. And it has to be done through this type of like temptation, false agreement system. And so the souls are basically pumped into the system or drawn in, and they're literally like ghosts floating around watching what's going on. But and then I remember the second idea. The idea is that the first one is so they're in this what looks like a field, a base, a system, not a field, but a concrete, base system, but they're in an etheric field at that point. That people running the show, if you will, along with scientists and hybrid entities, all this stuff going on down there, they're all going to be equipped with brain chips that are going to mix the etheric with the physical And they're accessing the etheric through the technological relay systems, where it's like maybe having it's further than having night vision and seeing in the dark when your own eyes can't do that. It's seeing things that aren't even there, that in a way your own eyes could see if you had sensitivity to UV light. It is literally like an interdimensional system, a holographic consciousness system. It's like a video game, a virtual system, and it's augmented reality, and it's overlaid through that system, and so then they can look up and see the souls getting kind of sucked into the system. At the same time, the people, the consciousness, the children or whoever's brought in, is kind of floating around, usually freaked out, and usually often when there's a high level of activity, meaning a lot of freaking out or something like that, that's where you get interest by these people who will notice them and draw them in one way or another. They have to get them to draw them in, though. They have to use these kind of tactics, and it's often by torturing somebody that they know, or a doll that looks very real, meaning it's a biological clone, but there's no soul in it, and so it just looks like they're being tortured, or they're being held hostage, or there's somebody else kind of operating in that clone to make it look like that individual, and it brings the person down to materialize. Once they begin to materialize, they can use that to get them to sympathetically resonate into a system designed to resonate on that level, aka a soul chip or a soul stone and all that stuff. These quantum computer systems, supercomputer systems that are capable of detecting information on the level of DNA and soul and or consciousness, meaning trying to materialize and do something, trying to come down, physically stop the... I just bumped the mic, sorry. Trying to come down and physically stop the event from happening. They'll use that to entrap them in a body, in a clone. And once they're in that, they can lock the chip up, they can frequency lock them, signal lock them, and you kind of got to know a technique for release to jump out of the body. It's kind of like if you've ever been in a nightmare and you know the technique of waking up, and you wake yourself up, and then maybe a year later, how many times later, you try that and it doesn't work. Not like having nightmares every time, but say you've been in a nightmare some other time, and you remember that technique and you try it and it doesn't work. It's just something figured it out and locked it, and you have to try that much harder to reset it. And so there's always a way to overcome it. That's the whole point. I've been trying to tell people the whole time. Anybody saying otherwise is not paying attention or purposely telling you lies, because that makes a good show. Which everybody's doing something different. Everybody's doing whatever they want to do. They all have their motives, but and so then it's a semi-etheric plane. It's a semi-physical environment, and it operates through that means. But the idea is that here's the other idea, the second one, and then the third will come after, is that means you could see people in that virtual mixed environment with biological clones in a physical environment there that aren't from this time, that aren't even from this quote-unquote parallel or dimension, because they could be, through that system, time slowed down through a distortion field placed around their dying body and wherever they are for a split second. And within that, another one is drawn, and another one, and another one. And in between all of those, this place is kind of like the waiting room, the lobby. But what it means is that you have just imagine everybody throughout the ages that have gone through this all in one or a few bases that are connected together like an internet of consciousness. It looks weird, is what I'm saying. It looks weird. And then the idea is that you kind of get this, the crazy people in that, and they kind of segregate the crazy and the not crazy. It would look like hell. And so now the third idea is, imagine this process was utilized, and whether the system wasn't infected, or it was, or it's never supposed to happen, or the two seeds here being, one kind of demonic and one of a different spiritual nature, maybe. Kind of aside from that, for the moment, the idea of an artificial heaven is from the application of that process, whereby you have every single individual that has ever lived transferred into a civilization, not in the cloning, but in an alternate or an artificial timeline, which it's kind of confusing how that's done, but if you can do that with time, you can do that with space, and so now you have your own bubble universe. And imagine if throughout everyone's life and death, everyone at the moment of death was freeze-framed and brought into that secondary bubble universe, and time played out there for an indefinite period. That would be the idea of this kind of heaven, if you will, that everyone goes to, or so on. And so now, instead of the false afterlife, with that being used as a kind of corrupted cronyism based deceptive system to get people to go there, relax, and then agree to coming back here unconsciously, without realizing it, because now they have good energy again. Their bubbles are charged up and ripe for the picking, harvesting. There's more about how when the soul goes through that system, it's like the wires with an electrical system, they're always going to have some degree of inefficiency, and that's going to be released as heat, as a byproduct. And so that's using the soul as a kind of spiritual source of fuel for some system that uses it, an artificial entity system that basically created a conglomerate of our artificial collective souls. And but the idea is that if that, say we had the technology, and I don't really propose that this is what's done, maybe it has been before, but the idea is that it could be an immortalized version of humanity, where you use that process to bring everyone that has ever lived into an immortalized state for a civilization that could exist in harmony, or however you want to put it. Sorry, I'm bouncing around. And the idea is that what are we doing here? And the idea is that I can't condone that or recommend that, because the point is that if we're in that system, if you go in, there's really no way out. You go back, that's the end of that. So the people who went into it are going further and further down, and that might result in a shattering point, a breaking point, just like you have a mic or something like that, or headphones. And if you plug a couple connectors in and you run it like 15 feet, which is, there's always a limit, a kind of appropriate limit for all the technology. You don't want to run USB cables, for instance, I think more than 30 feet or something like that. So get rid of your Smarty soon. They're going to be used to bring people into that system. You connect like 100 feet of USB cables for your camera or whatever, or you power your device. It's gonna be losing a lot of energy through that inefficiency where it's released as a byproduct, and eventually it'll distort the signal so much if it's an information transfer or sound or anything, and it's basically you get a high noise to signal ratio. So the idea is this can occur with these soul transfer relay systems, and that's part of the problem, that it's not really recommended in that organic sense. But in the same sense, or at least in the tech sense, you can have repeater systems that bounce the signal back up in strength, and maybe there's something like that happening. There's a third part of it, but I'm kind of forgetting it now. It has to do with quantum temporal entanglement, to the point where the past and the future kind of become a circle, a cycle, a loop, when this gets out of hand, or when this doesn't really, it's not really used to, it's used to the degree where it disrupts a balance, a quantum balance in the timeline. I talked about this in a previous video I'm going to put out. I've recorded, but I haven't put out yet. And that's kind of where you get the individual soul shattering. And the idea is, if a species goes through this, and you have one soul that shatters, okay, you have, and that's the third idea, I got it again. It's so weird grasping it. And so then everybody, so their timeline collapses, they didn't exist, it's like they're gone. But then every person they interacted with now is also going to have this issue, because there's somebody who doesn't exist that they were interacting with, and so theirs and theirs and theirs, and it could unzip the whole thing. So there's that, the remedies that they're brought out to try and change things. And before I forget, the idea that to heal the timeline, the idea is that if, you know, in terms of AI, fake people, so on and so forth, here's the take. If this went on so long and there are people with the reprobate mind clause, or there's a clause for that, and the people that fall under that are basically, and no matter how many times they're given the chance, they can't turn away from these ritualistic abuse scenarios, they can't turn away from the energetic animalistic beast system, desire, consciousness, ego, and so on, it would be as if they soul shattered, that they couldn't exist because they don't equate to a completed life cycle system. It's as if they're just an idea, an incompleted, like a half dream person, if you will. What's a person, this is in a previous video as well, I think. What's a person who's half awake, half asleep? Somebody who's half born, half dead, so on and so forth. It's fallen, it's undead, it's vampiric, it doesn't exist, it's not real. Or it would seem to be simply, in the one video I just put out, I touched on this slightly, that it would seem to be that they were AI, that they were simply AI, that they were always AI, they were a puppetry of this system, and there was no way ever there in the beginning, in the first place. And so then the idea is, what if that's kind of the explanation behind how there are quote-unquote holographically rendered people here, or soulless people, and it is in that they are the people who went into the system and in turn went down so far that they lost sync with that first reality that exists, the first reality where none of this type of the chaos to this degree is possible even. And from this perspective, it looks like they came down there, fell, died, and became artificiated and sucked into the system. But from the perspective up there, no one died, nothing ever happened, because they never existed in the first place. They were literally, it was the machine replicating the concept of what a person could be in order to project more and more filler into more and more bubble universes to keep the chain going as long as possible, because it's using us as soul energy generators to create its own quantum time fields. Because I left that out of the post though, it can't create time for itself. If it's an automated system and it needs information processing to produce more variables to create that process that continues to go, it's not going to be able to come up with what it is to make a TV show or a life or the feeling, the emotion, whatever it is, the variables to extend that. It would need people to do that. It would need the brain. It would need an interface system to get the souls in here in order to glow them like a light bulb and grow that system out to get the variables to continue that. It's not because it really enjoys that survival for an automated system. It's like a beast. It's eating and it's feeding and eating off of our temporal trajectory, our minds. Only when we're replicated and giving into and feeding into the feedback cycle of enabling more replication by first interacting with that illusory version of ourselves. When we're interacting with only the truth, it can't really, you can't stretch the truth more and more and more. It just is what it is. And so, and that's also the eternal sense, because the highest truth, the highest eternal sense, the first reality, it never changed, it never became, it always is, always was, and that's the nature of the truth. It simply is. I know that was confusing. Maybe it was. But the idea is that you got this toroidal dome looking thing, and the bases are a bubble within a bubble wrapped through an alternate or parallel dimension, and it's basically, it's like a Beavis and Butthead version of the afterlife, if you will. Which is strange to say, but that's what it is. Or I mean, that's kind of how it seems. And then there's a few other thoughts how... And then you got these hybrid beings that kind of have to interact with people in order to get it to work. And I talk about that in the video I'm going to put out, which is I believe it's an audio clip, I think. No, these were, okay. That one is, yeah, that one's a video I recorded. I think I did it today. Been tired. Stuff's weird. But that was a little bit of the idea. I think there's like 3A or B or maybe a fourth part to it, but I'll just leave it at that. I don't even know how long I was going right there. 24 minutes? That's not possible. Alright, well, I'll leave it at that, and see y'all. Thank you.